The search team's gloved hands paused at the frost-sealed edge of the abandoned rail depot, where layers of December ice clung to a buried shape that should not have been there. A tagged evidence marker, number 47, caught the dim winter sun and exposed what investigators had feared for weeks. If you like stories like this, make sure to subscribe and like the video. Buffalo, New York, in December 1984, was a city wrapped in lake-effect snow, chilled brick storefronts, flickering Christmas lights, and the solemn predictability of winter wind sweeping across the frozen Erie Basin. Holiday parades and department store garlands attempted to brighten a region that had long grown accustomed to silence, factory closures, and the long nights that seemed to hover over western New York each Christmas season. It was into this landscape that the disappearance of 22-year-old community college student and part-time gift shop clerk, Melissa Craine, entered the headlines. She vanished 3 days before Christmas Eve, leaving behind a small apartment decorated for the holidays, untouched wrapping paper, and untouched pay envelopes neatly folded inside her purse. Her parents, who lived across the river in Tonawanda, called police when she failed to arrive for Sunday dinner, a weekly ritual heightened by the festive month. Melissa's absence did not begin as national news, nor as a police emergency. Buffalo police logged it as a missing adult with no clear sign of danger, but the season mattered. The predictable visits, the family dinners, the routine of exchanging small gifts near New Year's, all of it sharpened the abnormality of her disappearance. She was young, reliable, and had no known conflicts. The timeliness of her vanishing, wedged between holiday gatherings and the first heavy snowfalls of late December, made the absence feel not merely concerning but unnatural. When investigators entered her Elmwood Village studio, they found evidence of a life paused but not abandoned. The heater was still humming. A strand of Christmas garland hung along her mantel. A records list of her shifts at the gift shop at the Broadway Mall showed she had closed the store at 9 p.m. on December 21, signing out under fluorescent holiday banners and the artificial pine scent sprayed through the corridors. Nothing in her space indicated a struggle. There was no overturned mug, no torn holiday card, no broken decoration. Only the presence of fresh winter boots near the door suggested she had returned home at least once after her shift, or perhaps never returned at all and bought them earlier that week. The timeline was tight. It was December. It was cold. And every hour off the grid was counted. The rail depot, where the cold evidence marker appeared weeks later, was not initially part of the investigation. That location surfaced only after a quiet lead from mall security. A logbook entry from the night of December 21 mentioned a man waiting near the gift shop, seen standing by the fake snow display and animatronic carolers long after closing. No name existed. No confrontation was recorded. But the note said he seemed to know Melissa, at least enough to stand close, speak softly, and wait with precision rather than chance. The officer's note included only one descriptive element. He looked like someone who did not belong in a shopping center the week of Christmas, wearing no scarf, no holiday attire, nothing festive, nothing to blend with the season's expected cheer. By early January 1985, the city was in the grip of another freeze. Christmas decor lingered in living room windows, tinsel sagged, lights dimmed, and the final notes of New Year's optimism had already faded. The missing flyers bearing Melissa's face had begun to curl at the corners, taped over older posters for winter coat sales and church choir events. The Buffalo press covered the case with a restrained tone. Local news reporters framed her disappearance as unusual, especially given the time of year when family gatherings were constant and travel traces easy to confirm. The absence of receipts, bus tickets, purchases, or phone calls pointed not toward voluntary departure, but toward a removal. Detectives shifted focus to the mall, the last confirmed sighting. Holiday security footage proved less helpful than anticipated, blurred by crowd increments and seasonal glare, but one clip from near the food court showed a tall figure standing at a distance while Melissa closed down the register. The man's posture was precise, hands untouched by gloves despite the bitter cold. He seemed to track her movements, not in a rush, not impatient. It was a posture of someone who knew her gait, her schedule, and the predictable quiet that arrived after store closing hours during late December when parking lots emptied and only cleaning crews remained. Months passed and snow melted to slush, then to the gray rinse typical of Buffalo in mid-March. Public attention drifted, families packed away their ornaments, and the season's associative memory, carols, gift-wrap, mall crowds, became fragments tied to an unresolved absence. The rail depot entered the picture when a seasonal grounds crew reported what they thought was disturbed soil near the service tracks, hidden by accumulated winter debris. The area had not seen regular maintenance since early fall. Out of use, freight lines ran along the river's industrial spine, close enough to receive drift winds that carried the sharp scent of cold steel and water. Investigators arrived with forensic kits, crime scene tarps, and the caution reserved for cases that had moved from disappearance to suspicion. The discovery beneath the iced-over ground was slow and respectful. There was no spectacle, no televised search party. The depot was cordoned off by thin perimeter tape that flapped in wind that felt like February even though it was calendar April. Holiday decorations lingering in homes across Buffalo, repurposed now for spring storage, contrasted with the silent excavation. Evidence logged on site included a monogrammed silver bracelet Melissa's parents later confirmed as her 21st birthday gift, engraved with a date that now felt unbearably close, yet irretrievably distant. Fibers from her winter coat were found, though the coat itself was not recovered. Soil analysis indicated recent ground disturbance consistent with December layering and repeated freeze cycles. Everything had remained sealed under winter's grip for months, preserving time in a way only cold weather can. The rail depot was situated just beyond the mall zone, reachable by a service road used mostly by delivery trucks. This meant the route was not random. Someone familiar with Buffalo's industrial outskirts and with Melissa's closing schedule had selected it. The man in the footage became central, and the absence of holiday attire, the neutral expression, the quiet familiarity now resonated with investigators in a different light. The holiday context, once cheerful, now functioned as forensic timestamp. The twinkling mall decorations had been on, witnesses recalled when the man waited. The Christmas choral loop had ended just before Melissa locked the store gate. Holiday employee overtime logs showed she was covering shifts for classmates traveling home for Christmas, making her schedule different than usual. This meant whoever watched her knew that schedule update. The detail was too precise to be coincidence. Detectives turned to her college community. Melissa was pursuing coursework in retail management. Records confirmed a classmate named Daniel H. had taken similar courses and had previously worked seasonal roles at the mall 2 years earlier. He was described in administrative notes as quiet, reserved, and persistent in asking to partner with her on class projects, though she often declined. Nothing in his file indicated threat, but the proximity to the gift shop schedule raised investigative interest. The department obtained a warrant for Daniel's employment records. He had no job during December 1984, no fixed residence beyond a rented room near Delaware Park, and no immediate family in the region. Interviews from the college, conducted without sensationalism, cast him as introverted but socially eager in limited ways, frequently attempting to insert himself into holiday events despite seemingly having no personal attachment to them. What intensified the case were not his social struggles but his precision. His notebooks, retrieved from the rental room with full legal authorization, contained lists of store hours, holiday closures, mall cleaning schedules, and specifically, Melissa's shift changes. There was no explicit harmful language, no threats, but the detail was unmistakable. The notes had been updated each week, matching her December modifications, including that final late shift on December 21. As Buffalo moved toward another holiday year, the depot remained sealed. Investigators held back only those details necessary to avoid compromising future charges. The holidays that once defined Melissa's final days now defined the investigation's frame. Winter winds, rail yards, tense mall corridors, and a city's attempt to wrap itself in Christmas light could no longer mask the chilling precision of someone who knew her schedule too well, who watched her walk under tinsel reflections, toward a December disappearance that would not fade with the turning of a calendar page. The forensic consolidation that followed the depot discovery unfolded not with dramatic revelation, but with systematic, measured accumulation. Evidence from beneath snowpack and soil layers was logged, sealed, and cataloged with winter precision, typical of northern investigations, where low temperatures preserve more than they destroy. The medical examiner's notes, written without sentiment or speculation, confirmed Melissa's identity through dental records and personal effects rather than accelerated biological decay. This allowed investigators to rebuild the final December hours of 1984 not through imagination, but through archived routine. Buffalo's winter calendar had always been predictable: Thanksgiving rush at the malls, Christmas sale rotations, New Year's clearance. It was in that retail rhythm that Melissa's life was most securely anchored. She was known for punctuality, for folding seasonal scarf displays with near photographic memory of placement, for greeting predictable customer patterns who arrived each December for last-minute ornament purchases. Her coworkers reported no strange interactions before the 21st, no stalked aisles, no suspicious notes. Yet the surveillance reconstruction, though grainy, combined with time-stamped door sensors, confirmed that someone followed her departure route, someone who did not purchase anything, speak to anyone, or behave as though they belonged in a festive retail setting. The suspect profile that began to form was not cinematic. It was quiet, procedural, built through mall entry logs, class schedules, library attendance slips at Buffalo State College, and parking lot heat signatures captured inadvertently on winter security tapes. That detail mattered. At 9:17 p.m., after Melissa's final shift scanout, a secondary heat outline appeared on camera near the loading dock exit. It lingered, unhurried despite the wind chill that reached negative digits that night. Forensic technicians later noted that lack of reactive movement indicated familiarity with cold conditions, not unprepared loitering. The lead investigator, a veteran accustomed to the slow churn of winter homicide caseloads, proceeded without public attention, without press releases, and without holiday appeal segments. This case required the weight of paperwork rather than dramatic pursuit. Phone tolls, though limited in 1984 technology, indicated no outgoing calls from Melissa after her shift. Bus lines showed no ticket scans. Taxi logs listed no pickups matching her description. It became increasingly clear that if she left the mall area, it was not by spontaneous agreement or casual invitation. The December night route toward the rail corridor was deliberate. Daniel's name resurfaced not because of a confession or witness panic, but because of a paper trail no one else possessed. His notebooks, lined with schedule grids, included notations that mirrored mall holiday calendars exactly. He had written her closing time on December 21 in blue ink, matching a shift she had accepted only 2 days prior. This eliminated mere coincidence. Investigators confirmed that only 2 employees knew that shift change besides the manager, Melissa herself, and the manager who posted it after lunchtime on the 19th. Daniel, not employed there, should not have known. This detail shifted probability toward premeditated interest rather than incidental observation. The rail depot's proximity to the mall, reachable by a service route that avoided main holiday traffic and December caroling crowds, aligned with a pattern of familiarity. The suspect had chosen a location immune to holiday disruption. That made him someone who understood industrial Buffalo more than festive Buffalo. Despite emerging evidence, procedural restraint remained. Police requested employment verification from stores Daniel had worked in previous seasons. A holiday shop at the same mall 2 winters earlier confirmed his presence during gift wrapping promotions. A former supervisor recalled that he tended to hover after shifts, not in violation of rules, but with a kind of watchfulness that seemed to exist independent of workload. No disciplinary action was filed, but his name remained recorded only due to shift audits. The investigative interviews held in early spring 1985 leaned heavily on notebooks, timelines, and mall footage, never speculation. Daniel responded calmly when asked about holiday routines. He admitted attending the mall during that December, citing loneliness as a motivator. He had no family gatherings, no Christmas meals, and no New Year countdowns to anchor him in social cycles. Investigators did not label him guilty based on isolation, but his documentation of Melissa's movements, combined with knowledge of her shift hours, positioned him in a role beyond passive bystander. A certified warrant granted access to his rental space once more, this time focusing on winter outerwear. A coat recovered from the closet contained fibers distinctively matching Melissa's scarf, confirmed by forensic microscopy. The fibers were contact fragments, not transfer through environmental coincidence. They indicated proximity, direct physical adjacency on the night she vanished. This removed all ambiguity. Prosecutors entered quietly. They avoided press until chain of custody integrity was beyond question. The region's post-holiday lull helped. Christmas had passed, New Year's optimism faded, and Buffalo had turned to its typical January endurance stance. That emotional landscape supported a silent, investigative transition from possibility to accusation. Daniel was taken into custody on a frigid morning when the sky still held remnants of holiday gray, even after decorations were removed from light posts downtown. His demeanor remained neutral, neither shocked nor combative. He stated familiarity with Melissa, describing her as someone kind to him during prior holiday seasons when he worked nearby. No threat language emerged. No conflict narrative. Instead, the case distilled to logistical obsession. He had tracked her, not for cinematic motive but for quiet fixation. The trial began the following November, nearly a full year after her disappearance. As the city prepared for another holiday cycle, courthouse wreaths and winter banners lined the corridors, creating a seasonally discordant backdrop for a case that required emotional restraint. The prosecution presented the notebooks, the fiber analysis, the schedule tracking, and the depot location access. Rail maintenance logs confirmed Daniel had been seen near the tracks weeks before Melissa vanished, offering no justification beyond wandering. Combined, the evidence formed a cold, measured sequence. Witness testimony remained brief. Coworkers described last December's shift adjustments. Mall security outlined the log entry noting his presence near the gift shop. Forensic experts detailed soil layering, freeze cycles, and fiber retention. No exaggeration was needed. The procedural accumulation spoke for itself. Daniel's defense offered not denial but dissociation, attributing his actions to misguided attachment rather than intent. Yet the court, operating within legal criteria rather than emotional allowances, ruled based on evidence rather than explanation. The conviction was delivered without raised voices. Second-degree murder under New York statute. Life imprisonment without parole eligibility based on case classification and aggravating circumstances tied to premeditated surveillance. The courtroom remained quiet. No holiday music filtered through the hall, despite the season. A subdued snowfall coated the courthouse steps, identical in texture to the winter that had concealed Melissa's story months earlier. With legal closure achieved, Buffalo returned to typical December rhythms. Lights reappeared in storefronts, church choirs resumed, and malls reopened for another season of last-minute gifts and artificial pine fragrance. Yet the case reshaped awareness in the region. Seasonal crowds became more alert. Gift shop employees were trained to report waiting individuals even without visible threat. Parking lot escorts became standard after closing shifts. Quiet procedural reforms replaced emotional reaction. Melissa's family received her belongings in a sealed property box. The bracelet, the winter boot tag, and the recovered scarf fibers documented in lab reports. They held a reserved memorial that January, delayed until snowfall felt less like forensic archive and more like weather. The depot was finally cleared, reclassified, and fenced. Its rail lines remained inactive, but its significance moved from silent winter burial to completed testimony. The season that once marked her disappearance now marked resolution. In the months following the trial, the broader implications of the December 1984 timeline continued to unfold in professional circles far beyond Buffalo. Law enforcement academies referenced the case in cold case coursework, not for drama, but for the slow, meticulous reconstruction that defined it. Winter conditions, holiday scheduling, and crowded shopping corridors had created both cover and clarity, and it was the procedural navigation of those opposing elements that ultimately resolved the disappearance of 22-year-old Melissa Craine. By early 1986, one full calendar cycle after her remains were recovered, internal memos within the Buffalo Police Department confirmed a completed audit of their missing persons protocols. The audit did not frame the case as a department failure nor as an investigative miracle. Instead, it acknowledged that holiday disappearances had unique parameters that required amplified attention. The season's predictable chaos, travel delays, store closings, relatives arriving or departing, extended mall hours, created a landscape where certainty was easy to misread. Absences during late December were often assumed to be benign. A last-minute trip, a delayed call, a change in holiday plan. Melissa's silence initially fell into this category, which slowed the urgency of the first 48 hours. The file, still stored in the cold case archive under the heading Craine, Melissa Disappearance December 1984/Recovery April 1985, remains thick not with speculation, but with layered verification. Soil density charts, cadaver dog logs, mall security staffing rosters, meteorological prints documenting freeze-thaw cycles between December 24 and February 14, all aligned into a non-negotiable reconstruction. Each page reflected the same truth. Her disappearance was not spontaneous, not opportunistic, and not an accident. The holiday context of the case, once a backdrop of carols and pine garlands, became a chronological tool. Court testimony emphasized how retail employee schedules shift sharply between Thanksgiving weekend and Christmas Eve. The mall had operated extended hours, which altered foot traffic patterns and created predictable pockets of near-empty corridors long after dark. Melissa's final shift, a substitution for a coworker traveling home to Connecticut, placed her in one of those quiet pockets at precisely the moment her observer expected it. The observer, legally named and recorded in transcripts as Daniel Hartwell, entered the New York State correctional system without appeal. Prison intake documentation described him as calm, compliant, and medically stable. He did not speak publicly, did not request interviews, and did not generate the notoriety that sometimes accompanies seasonal true crime headlines. His internal psychological evaluations remained sealed, protected by classification rules and routine privacy statutes. His motive, if defined at all, was categorized not in the language of cinematic obsession, but in the legal terminology of targeted fixation, resulting in premeditated abduction. Local Buffalo press, when reflecting on the case each December, did not retell the drama. They referenced the procedural strength. One editorial from the Buffalo Courier dated December 1986 noted that the case had reshaped the region's understanding of routine endings to holiday retail shifts. The article did not sensationalize Melissa's final hours. Instead, it referenced best practice advisories issued quietly to store managers. Insist on security escorts after dark. Document unfamiliar individuals loitering during closing rotations. And treat December disappearances with the same immediacy as any other month. In police classrooms, instructors spoke of environmental compression factors. Snowbanks along mall parking lots narrow footpathways, rain ice glare reduces visibility, and seasonal decorations obscure sightlines. The animatronic choir scene placed outside the gift shop may have obstructed views more than intended. The artificial snowfall machine and reindeer display created pockets of movement and shadow, which, though innocuous, provided structural disguise for someone waiting with purpose. Forensic teams, revisiting their own procedural notes, credited the cold for slowing decomposition and protecting contact fibers. Fiber transfer, usually diluted by movement or environmental friction, stayed intact. The silver bracelet, though tarnished by months below frozen ground, retained engraved clarity. Each of these preserved artifacts operated as anchor points in a timeline that might otherwise have dissolved by spring. The depot itself, stripped of ornament or history, required no narrative enhancement. Its structural relevance came from disuse, location, and anonymity. It had fallen off active rail maps years earlier and remained a forgotten industrial residue of Buffalo's earlier shipping era. Only someone who studied route surveys, holiday maintenance closures, and deserted access roads could have selected it without coincidence. This layer of planning removed the final veil of uncertainty about whether the disappearance was accidental or impulsive. Melissa's personal records, once sealed by court order until trial conclusion, were returned to her family in late 1986. Among them were her college notebooks filled with retail marketing terms, handwritten lists of December shifts, and outlines for a class presentation she never delivered. These materials, placed in a single family archive box, became both memorial and closure. Her parents did not grant interviews. They remained in Tonawanda, living quietly near the river, attending holiday gatherings with measured presence rather than absence. Each winter, neighbors noted their steady involvement in seasonal charity drives rather than public memorial vigils. Law enforcement agencies across New York began adopting a new classification tag during holiday months. Seasonal disappearance risk elevated. The classification did not imply suspicion, but emphasized awareness when routine patterns break during socially congested months. Reports that would have once been logged with a wait period now triggered immediate welfare checks. December, once treated as an excusable period for travel-related disappearance fluctuating, was redefined administratively. Buffalo malls also transformed their post-closing procedures. The gift shop where Melissa worked changed ownership by 1988, but mall policy remained. Closing employees walked in pairs, security made routine sweeps at 15-minute intervals, and unidentified observers were logged, not dismissed as lonely shoppers escaping winter cold. The rail depot was sold to the city in 1989 and rezoned for non-commercial use. No memorial plaque was requested or installed. Its significance remained legal, not symbolic. The site, once a quiet convergence point in a December disappearance, returned to the neutral role of an industrial parcel, marked only in internal law enforcement maps for historic record. By the early 1990s, the case was referenced less frequently in public holiday coverage, but remained embedded in departmental training. Files on the disappearance circulated in academic journals for forensic analysis, focusing on winter preservation, fiber adherence, and schedule-based stalking, rather than psychological speculation. Autopsy training notes used the phrase cold retention integrity, referencing how lake-wind environments slow environmental breakdown and create unusual clarity in long-term missing cases. What distinguished Buffalo, 1984 from dozens of other seasonal disappearances was not the presence of holiday decoration or the emotional pull of Christmas timing, but the straight alignment between evidence and calendar. Every recorded element supported the next. No improvisation, no guesswork, no interpretive leap. The case trajectory remained linear. Shift change, shadowed surveillance, winter corridor, industrial endpoint, frozen concealment, mid-April thaw, fiber confirmation, notebook reconstruction, conviction. By the time the 10th anniversary passed, Melissa's name rarely resurfaced beyond archival context. This lack of sensational anniversary coverage reflected the case's nature: solved, documented, and closed. There were no disputes about guilt, no alternative theories, no appellate reversals. The case held the kind of resolution investigators describe as rare not because of unexpected brilliance, but because every procedural step was executed without disruption. In Western New York, December returned to its normal cadence: lake effect warnings, evergreen markets, mall choirs, and the ritual quiet that arrives by late evening when snow impacts sound and light in equal measure. Those who worked the original case retired, their notes preserved in climate-controlled storage. Their successors absorbed not the emotion but the structure. In the end, Melissa remained part of Buffalo's winter record, not as unsolved loss but as the reason surveillance notes are kept, shift adjustments are tracked, and seasonal disappearances are treated with immediacy rather than postponement. The cold, the depot, the fiber trace, and the unvaried timeline created one of the region's most methodical closures, ending not with resonance but with forensic quiet. In the years that followed, Buffalo's handling of winter disappearances and post-holiday investigative procedures settled into a mature equilibrium. The disappearance of 22-year-old Melissa Craine no longer circulated in active public memory, yet its procedural imprint remained structurally embedded in regional policing standards. It became the type of case referenced not on television retrospectives or anniversary specials, but in bindered police briefings, academic forensic seminars, and mall security orientation files distributed in late November, just before retail rush resumed. Buffalo itself continued its seasonal rhythm. Thanksgiving gatherings marked by lake wind rattling window panes, downtown streets dressed in authentic wreaths and municipal bulbs, neighbors carrying foil pans of stuffing and candied yams across icy curbs. December storefronts still bathed Elmwood Village and the downtown corridor in warm golden lights. Train whistles still echoed over river ice at dawn, and holiday travel still created fluctuating population counts. Yet the collective assumption that any brief absence during December could be explained purely by seasonal congestion eroded permanently after 1984. From 1987 onward, missing adult reports filed between December 15 and January 5 were placed into immediate action status, a classification reserved previously for minors and suspected abductions. The proximity to holiday anchors, Christmas Eve dinners, New Year's Eve gatherings, winter mass services, meant absence could be measured against certainty. If no predictable contact occurred, if holiday routine broke without warning, the department moved quickly. This new standard required no publicity, no memorial campaign. It persisted simply as protocol. The Craine file, stored in the climate-controlled archive at the Erie County Crime Records Unit, contained its completeness in silence. There were no subsequent appeals by the convicted party, no emergent claims of additional involvement, no shifts in legal interpretation. Even within system reviews, Hartwell remained static, sentenced, housed, and removed from further judicial movement. In winter 1992, nearly 8 years after the disappearance, a criminology journal published a technical review of the case's forensic integrity, focusing not on motive but on seasonal data factors. It highlighted the significance of freeze duration from December 21 onward, noting how exposure limited environmental interference and preserved fiber transfer on Melissa's outer garments. A subsection examined mall surveillance blind angles created by oversized holiday decor, wreaths wider than standard columns, suspended lights obscuring camera lines, decorative snowfall curtains disrupting movement clarity. These visual obstructions were deemed not causative but contributory, enabling an individual with precise timing to remain unchallenged. Mall infrastructure was updated accordingly in subsequent years. Seasonal design teams reduced visual bulk in areas adjoining exits and loading docks. Garlands no longer draped over access corridors where shift-tending workers walked alone at 9 or 10 p.m. retail safety walkthroughs replaced aesthetic planning as the priority in internal December meetings. No public notice was made of these changes. They were internal, incremental, and intended to prevent recurrence rather than acknowledge history. Melissa's relatives continued their quiet observance. Each Christmas Eve, they placed a candle in their Tonawanda living room window, not as broadcast ceremony but as personal practice. The flame served no advocacy purpose. With the case solved, no awareness campaign remained necessary. It was simply an annual acknowledgement of a life that once fit squarely into the rituals of winter gatherings and now remained part of the season's internal architecture rather than its spoken narrative. Buffalo in the 1990s evolved, like many American post-industrial cities, into a space of historical reclaiming. Warehouses along the waterfront were converted into lofts and dining spaces. The mall where Melissa last worked underwent renovation and rebranding. Holiday retail continued, though marked by measured caution during closing hours. Security officers rotated through seasonal posts with updated training modules, emphasizing quiet observation and documentation, rather than presuming innocence in still corridors. The rail depot, inert long after evidentiary closure, remained fenced and monitored through municipal land records. It was neither demolished nor commemorated. Its role was finished, existing only in the geography of case reports. Its quiet returned fully minus secrecy, minus question. The criminal conviction that had concluded the case did not produce cultural echo. Hartwell, by all official records, lived in consistent compliance within the state facility to which he was assigned. There were no requests for media interviews, no claims of wrongful conviction, no legal revision petitions. His name appeared only in court record indexes and prison assignment lists, linear and unchanging. Winter, however, remained the thematic constant. It was the cold that preserved the fiber trace, the soil layering, the bracelet engraving, and ultimately the timeline. Lake effect snowfall, common to Buffalo and rarely dramatic to locals, functioned not merely as backdrop but as forensic containment. The city's identity, its December hush, its early dusk, its frozen rail lines, made the case solvable rather than obscured. Seasonal crime analysts later compared Buffalo's 1984 investigative outcome with cases from cities whose climates allowed rapid decomposition and evidence loss. They noted that cold-weather disappearance cases, though emotionally difficult due to holiday timing, often granted investigators a preservation advantage that warmer regions lacked. They cited Melissa's file as a procedural model. Linear shift log, consistent surveillance timestamps, preserved fiber contact, unambiguous location access records, and no contradictory witness statements. Case closure did not bring community dramatization. Local newspapers, when referencing the case in end-of-decade retrospectives, described it only in brief summary terms: resolved, prosecuted, and administratively complete. For families living near the depot or the mall, December regained its sensory markers: fresh pine, window frost, brass choir bells, and no longer invoked investigation imagery. That quiet normalization is often the most conclusive sign of closure, even in communities shaped by long winters and longer memories. By the early 2000s, the Craine case lived solely in academic and administrative compartments. Buffalo's annual December police circular included a sentence referencing holiday shift protections, but the absence of Melissa's name in those notations confirmed the legal finality. Safety measures no longer required emotional citation. They were part of structural readiness. In Tonawanda, her family aged into quieter roles. Holiday dinners remained intact. Grandchildren learned the annual routine of placing ornaments on a well-lit tree, and the candle in the window remained without explanation to younger family members. Not every ritual requires context to continue. Some simply persist because time, though it moves, does not erase sequence. When forensic archivists conduct periodic digital transfers of historic case files to updated data systems, Melissa's record transitions without fanfare. It is scanned, preserved, cross-referenced, and returned. No sections are under dispute. No notes prompt addenda. The integrity remains. In the end, Buffalo's winter, with its stillness and density of snow-packed streets, returned to being what it had always been: a season that compresses sound, slows motion, and marks the calendar with ritual. The case that once moved beneath it has long concluded, leaving behind not legend, not myth, not renewed broadcast, but institutional clarity. The final notation in the Erie County Archive reads simply: Case Craine Melissa. Status closed. Judicial outcome: conviction, life sentence. Procedural notes: winter preservation integrity confirmed. Post-case changes: security reinforcement, disappearance classification adjustment, mall closing escort standardized. It is a quiet ending, one befitting a solved cold case where resolution arrived not through emotional spectacle, but through evidence preserved by weather, routine, and unbroken procedural application. In Buffalo, December continues to approach each year with its familiar character: glow against frozen windows, early dusk along the river, and the deliberate calm of communities accustomed to long, wind-carved winters. For those who worked the case, then retired, and for those who never knew it at all, the holiday season persists as it always did, defined by cold air, lit homes, and the silent assurance that one winter disappearance was not only investigated but fully, permanently, and lawfully resolved.